Hello, hello. Welcome back to Leading Women in Tech with me, your host, Toni Collis, talking about everything you need to be a leader as an extraordinary woman in tech. Today, we're talking about something that is a core skill most of us are never taught, but is essential for you to get what you need. We're talking negotiation. I've talked about negotiation before on the podcast, but I want to do a dedicated episode where we talk about how to negotiate your worth, your salary, your recognition, your opportunities. I want you to understand your value. I want you to be advocating for yourself, and I want you to be effectively communicating every day the skills that you bring to the table that means that you should be propelled forward. I'm going to be talking strategies for negotiation, compensation, handling counter offers, positioning yourself for recognition, advancement, opportunities, and I'm going to talk mindset, because for you to do this, you need to be proactive. You need to have the mindset of I deserve this and I can do this. And you want to empower yourself to achieve this every day. So let's dive on in. When you really begin to understand your value and advocate for yourself, you are going to see a shift in how people treat you. This isn't just about getting well compensated. This is about owning your value. One of the things I love to do with clients is I say to them, have you figured out how much you actually cost per hour? Take your annual salary, then divide it by how many days of the year you work. So you need to figure out if you work 5 days a week, right? And you take 4 weeks holiday, you're going to work 48 weeks of the year, multiply that by 5, whatever number that is. Take your gross salary, divide it by that many days. That's your day rate. Now divide it by 8 if you work 8 hours a day. There's other ways you can do that, but you get the idea. Calculate your hourly rate. Then double it or even triple it. That's the cost to the company of you. Your salary isn't the only cost of having you, believe me. It is either double or triple depending on what sector you're in. A lean startup, it might be slightly less than that, might be 1.75. But a doubling is a good baseline for understanding the cost of having you on the team. Most people I work with are shocked when they realize how much they are worth per hour. And then I say, do you know how much your peers are making? For some of the women that I work with, that is one of the reasons they come to work with me. And they do. And that's part of the problem. Their peers are making more, or their peers are getting promoted and they should have been the one that's got promoted because they're doing the job, or they're better qualified. And so therefore they should be getting the salary that somebody else has got because they got promoted, but my client didn't. I said, now work it out for that person. They're like, oh, I couldn't charge that. That number's crazy. Here's the thing. If you know that you are good enough, that's actually your market value. And I want you to start believing that. If you don't believe it, then people around you don't believe it either. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with talking about how we value ourselves. So many of us don't believe in negotiation, sadly. We simply accept the first offer or bare minimum offer. The problem is that has a massive impact on your current, but also your future earnings. Every single future salary you have is often based on your current salary. Certainly while you're in the same company, pay increases are typically based on your previous salary. Their bonuses are based on your current salary. Everything starts with where you are right now. So if you don't increase your salary, you are at a disadvantage in terms of future earnings for the rest of your career. Again, something I like to point out to people when they come and work with me is they're wondering about spending money working with us. And I'm like, well, we're not just talking about getting you a pay rise right now, or getting you landing this job, which is going to pay X amount more right now. We're talking about the cumulative effect over the next 20, 30 or 40 years, how long you've got left to work. We're talking at that point, hundreds of thousands, potentially even millions of dollars on the table, all because of knowing how to stand your ground and negotiate for yourself. Every attempt you make at leveling yourself is also having an impact on the gender pay gap. So part of what I want to do here, you will know my mission here is to change the technology industry, make it more inclusive. And part of that is addressing the gender pay gap. We're only going to get women to stay in tech if we're well compensated, right? And I want you to be one of those women who's advocating. And by advocating, I mean put yourself first, because it makes it so much easier for the other women around you to do the same thing. I've heard stories too many times and been told, often by other women, by the way, which just breaks my heart. Just figure out what you need and negotiate for that. But this falls so short. It's crucial to figure out what you're truly worth and negotiate for that. Otherwise, you're not just doing yourself, but the entire industry a disservice. You're saying people with your skills, we can get away with paying them this little, rather than people with these skills are valuable because of a rarity. They are a high value commodity. In my mind, if they need you, they will pay for you. We do live in a capitalist society, so it is about how many people there are, which is one of the reasons as a leader, you can command more, because as a great leader, there just aren't that many great leaders out there. As I'm sure you figured out if you listen to this podcast, there's a lot of terrible leadership out there, right? Great leaders command a higher salary because we're actually in short supply. But this is not just about your immediate financial gain. This is negotiating as a skill for your leadership. This is demonstrating that you know how to hold your ground. This is saying, I'm negotiating right now, but I'm also going to be negotiating resource, time allocations, headcount, what my team is and isn't prepared to do. You are living the negotiation skills that you need as an effective leader the moment you start negotiating your compensation plan. How do we start with negotiation though? Well, you've got to understand your value proposition, right? If you've done any sales, you know this is really important. If you've ever run a startup, value proposition is key. That applies to you too. You've got to know your unique skills, your experiences, your qualifications that set you apart from others in your field. Do an honest self-assessment. What do you bring to the table? Why do you deserve to be compensated? By the way, if you're made an offer, they decided you were the best candidate. You are by definition the best available. So why would you not demand the right compensation for your skill set? Why would you not say, the current job market says that this is what I'm worth? Why would you not make the demand and better position yourself to negotiate for that higher salary, better opportunity, and better recognition as a result? You can easily find out great compensation metrics out there. It's so easy today. Go to things like salary.com, levels.fyi for tech roles, Glassdoor. Just always remember, when you're putting in job titles, don't just look at the geography, because there is often not a lot of data in one small geography. I will quite often do countrywide. I'll then do major cities, and I'll see what the difference is between the cities. But in this day and age, I'd always advocate going for the top end, unless you live in a really cheap cost of living city, right? Go for near the top end. And here's the other thing, particularly Glassdoor, always take the top end of the range. This is historical data. By definition, it is out of date the moment it is posted. There's a historical bias to the data. I always like to take the top 20%, then add 10% to this figure, and that's my starting point for any negotiation. I'll say you should land in that top 20%, but if you start your negotiation in that range plus 10, you're going to then be able to come down to that. It's a really, really great place to get your baseline. And you can say, based on my skills, my experience, and the industry, having done my research, this is what I think I should be valued at. Aim for that top end. I know it's scary. Do not aim for the middle, please. And definitely don't aim for the bottom. So the next thing is, once you've done your research and you know that base, the total comp, what fractions bonuses, all that kind of stuff, and it gets very messy very quickly with base, RSUs, that's when you get restricted stocks that vest over a period of time. You might get a sign-on bonus. You might get, your bonuses might be several different types based on team performance, individual performance, company performance, all that kind of stuff. They will try and give you like, we expect you to get 40% of your salary as a bonus, but you want to know your base salary and your total comp with bonuses, but not RSUs, not stock options, not equity. That's the thing you need to make the most effort to negotiate. But always remember that your bonus and any stock might never arrive. Bonus is more likely to arrive, but that's the first thing that goes during a recession. They'll cut bonuses normally before they cut teams. So you need to have a good base. You should be able to live off your base. Your bonus you need to treat as a bonus. It is something that is lovely to have, but you can never guarantee it's coming. I think in this day and age, we all assume we're going to get the bonus. And then, for example, during COVID, we had a lot of people, their bonuses evaporated and they really, really struggled. So you want to make sure that your base you can live on. Your bonus is a nice top up. Equity, funny money. It's not entirely that. Like if the company you're moving to is about to go through an acquisition and there's going to be a payout, that might be a deal sweetener. It might be the way that they meet you at your compensation amount. But maybe they can't meet you at that base and they say, well, we're going to give you, when we go through this close, we're expecting to do in a few months' time, we're going to give you this specific equity type bonus. Great. At that point, great. But I would then be looking at what is the real possibility of them selling and at what price? Have they got, for example, reports on the different prices they might sell at and what the probabilities are assigned with that? What's the timescale? What's a realistic timescale? And they might ask you to sign an NDA, but you may well be able to get access to their internal expectation documents around that. Certainly for a very senior position, I think that is a very valid thing to ask for if they're planning equity, and that's part of the deal. You want to know if that equity is ever going to vest, if it's like a really big portion of what's going to happen. But it also therefore demonstrates that you know how to deal with these things. You understand business. You understand counter arguments. You understand objections. You understand value and what you bring to the table. I don't want you falling into the trap of over-explaining. If they say we can't do that, emphasize what you bring to the role and ask them for a counter offer. It's essential to never give away your red line number until you're prepared to walk away. I always suggest go in with the number that you figured out you want to ask for, which is ideally at least your red line plus 10%, ideally plus 20%, because your red line is your walk away number. That's the number you asked for. And make sure you include the base, the bonus, give them the breakdown if that's an important thing. As I've hopefully just advocated to you, I think you should have a red line on your base as well as your red line on your total comp. And if they then say, no, we can't do that, they say, okay, bring me a counter offer. You don't need to hedge, and you definitely don't give your red line until you are ready to walk away. Because if they offer you a red line, that's it, you're done. If they can't meet your red line, you have to be prepared to walk away. I know I'm fully aware that our red lines change in a negotiation. I like people to have it written down and really know why it's important. But if you really want a job, it can feel like, oh, but maybe, which is why I don't want you to share it until the last possible moment, right? It's really, really important that you don't cut yourself short just because you're getting freaked out here. A leader holds her own, even though it's uncomfortable and difficult. And to hold your own in a successful negotiation, you need to pause. I love to say, I would like to have, and then sit and be quiet. Something like, I'm looking for a base of X. I'm looking for a total comp of Y. Where can you meet me? And then just be quiet. Or how does that sound? And just be quiet. Let them be, right? If they come back and say, oh, well, that's going to be difficult, say, okay, I hear you. Go off and come back to me. Go and investigate and come back to me. If they're like, it's going to be difficult, I definitely can't do that, and say, well, go back and come with the counter offer. Don't solve the problem for them there on the call. Hold your ground, at least on that first conversation. Even if that first conversation is way, way back early on in your recruiter screening. Although I'm starting to come to the position of not giving a number in recruiter screenings. I always used to say you need to give a range. But if you can put them off, I would always say something like, the number I'm looking for is really going to be dependent on the job. I'd like to find out more before I talk about compensation. And that will often work to put them off. Now, some recruiters will push and push and push, give them a high range, but say, however, for the right role, I'm sure we can come to a mutually agreeable position, because you're indicating that it's more important to you that you have the right role than the right salary. And what you need them to do is fall in love with you. At the recruiter screening stage, they're looking for reasons to cut candidates. They have not fallen in love with you. At the offer stage, when they've decided they want you, they are far more likely to move heaven and earth to give you an offer that you like. Next, when you're actually asking for what you want to be clearly and confidently expressing your skills and experiences that align with the needs of the role in the company. You're going to highlight your accomplishments. You're going to emphasize the value you bring that is going to strengthen the role, the company, and you are therefore going to be strengthening the positioning in this negotiation. You need to be practicing active listening, paying close attention to the needs and perspectives of the other parties. I always say to my clients, negotiation starts the very first moment you speak to somebody. That recruiter screening is the first negotiation, but every single interview you have, there's a little bit of negotiation going on. You're not talking comp, but you're learning about what matters. You're learning what keeps people awake at night, or why they should push for you to get the compensation you need, because you're going to solve something that is keeping them awake at night. And you're also learning why you're valuable to the organization in their minds. And you're selling yourself at every interview. That's all negotiation. But then at the actual official negotiation, you then need to reiterate all of that. You've used this active listening skill to understand their pain points. You then want to tailor your negotiation pitch, demonstrating precisely how your experience is going to address their specific needs. Even if you've already said it 10 times over the last couple of weeks during the interviews. Remember, they've just interviewed a whole load of people. They've landed on you, but you're a mishmash in their head between who said that, and who said the other. They might love you, but just take a moment to carefully reiterate your strengths, your accomplishments, and why you're the ideal candidate for the job. Give them that refresher. Keep it top of mind, those key value points. Be assertive yet respectful. Be clear and direct. Request your preferences, and then hold space and silence as they go, let me think about that, right? What you want to avoid doing is going in with a number and then second guessing yourself. You're like, oh, but I'm sure we could do this, that, and the other, and just talking. Say the number, aim, and pause. It's essential for negotiating your worth and securing that best possible outcome that you pause and you give space. You might be surprised how easy this is once you've done it a few times. But I also want you to be thinking about your immediate and long-term goals in your negotiation. Salary, bonuses, financial incentives, it's great. Make sure you're meeting the industry standards, that you're valued for your skill set in the competitive market. But you also want to be looking at non-monetary benefits. If you thought about flexible work arrangements, professional development, a lot of my clients who have worked with me for years will go in and say part of this package needs to be coaching. And I want to choose the coach. Watch out for that one, by the way. Or advancement prospects. Like if you can, if they're promising you an advancement, get it written down. I personally have experienced, and so many of the women I work with have experienced being promised something at interview that never materializes in terms of promotion options or responsibility options. It's hard to get that tied down because a company isn't committing to it now because they can't. So it's hard to get them to commit in the future. But at least get a commitment to review written down. Or when this happens, I will be the first one considered for it, right? It's important to consider how accepting the role you're planning to accept is going to impact your future career. Sometimes, although it feels very scary, it can seem worth taking a role that pays less for the short-term offer or significant opportunity and growth and advancement in the future. I don't typically advocate that. Not many of my clients are properly compensated. Far too many of the women I work with are undercompensated, in my opinion. And so I'm like, we can get you a growth place and a better income. Sometimes they'll take less than I think they're capable of because they want to take a role that's going to allow them to grow. They want to go to a specific kind of company, like a startup. Typically will pay less, not always. And so it's worth taking this into consideration as you negotiate. Make sure, for example, maybe the title is important to you. I've known people take a job for the title and get lower comp or vice versa. What matters to you is completely up to you. Nobody else gets to say, not even your significant other. They might have opinions because somebody's got to pay the bills, but it's your life, nobody else's. So if you want that title, that's not wrong. If you want that compensation, that's not wrong. If you want to work in a flexible work environment, that's not wrong. Don't listen to people who say, well, I think you're asking for too much by asking for that. No, or you're being greedy asking for that much compensation, or why are you so focused on job title? It's entirely up to you what you focus on, right? I think at certain points in our lives, we always need to focus on different things. And I certainly see the people that have neglected things like job titles suffer later on. People that have neglected their comp have suffered later on. And I think we need to kind of look at both over time. We shouldn't do one or the other to exclusion. It goes to pretty much everything in there. So make sure your negotiation pays careful consideration to those immediate and long-term goals that you have, so that it's going to be a beneficial arrangement, not just for the company, but for you. Another piece of this is navigating recognition and advancement opportunities. Seeking that feedback as you regularly go, understanding the feedback in your career and how it's perceived, and then advocating for promotions and title changes, right? So it's the second form of negotiation while you're in a role. So I want you to be always looking at negotiating your current role. I want you to be negotiating expanding responsibilities, or taking responsibilities and passing them to somebody else because you need to work on this thing over here. To do that, you need to know your tangible contributions, impact on the organization. You need to be constantly having conversations around the case of recognition. You need to be highlighting examples of your work that have made that positive business impact. You ideally want to have a very clearly marked out career path that can adapt and change, but you know where you want to go. So you're taking on projects and opportunities and innovation opportunities that allow you to grow, exceed expectations, and position you ready for where you want to go next. It's why I spend so much time doing what I call the sparkle plan, what it is that we want to do to make us sparkle as women. Do this with all my clients pretty much. And it's figuring out who do I want to be and then reverse engineering the steps to get there and making sure that each step helps us sparkle. Because I don't want you having 5 years of graft and not loving it. I want you to end up somewhere, but also enjoy the journey. When you know what you're aiming for, it's much easier to advocate, hey, I'll take on that opportunity. If you don't do that, your negotiation when it comes to, we need somebody to do this, but there's 10 things to do, is harder because you don't know what your red lines are. If you know what you want to do next, you can be like, I need this skill, and this skill. When a project comes up, you'll be like, is that going to help me? No, keep my head down. Somebody else can do that because there's always more people because there's always too much work to do, right? Is it going to help me? No. You could then take it for other reasons, like it's just a prudent thing to do, which kind of does help you. But more to the point, when the right opportunity comes along, you're not swamped in work that isn't serving you. You've got that little bit of bandwidth and you're able to make the case because you've been quantifying your achievements. You've been sharing the value you bring to the organization. You're trusted that people trust that you will deliver. So you're able to say, I'll take that on and I'll do extraordinarily well. And therefore you're trusted with it. That's a form of internal negotiation that leads to promotion opportunities. And again, when you're going for a promotion, you need to always be making that case all the time, build the paperwork, but also do your research. Just because it's internal doesn't mean you shouldn't look at industry standards on compensation and advancement, that you shouldn't be negotiating internally as well. Don't get me wrong, some organizations, you are just going to ladder up and you won't have much of a say. But you might be surprised how many times there is an opportunity to negotiate. It's just certain managers make it sound like there isn't any opportunity to negotiate. And therefore you think, oh, they've offered me this, that's what I'm getting. Not entirely true in every organization. If you don't ask, you will not know what your options were. So make sure you understand, again, your value proposition and advocate for yourself and your contributions. Okay, let me circle back now to negotiations in general, in particular job offers, but also internal job offers or promotions. One thing that you've probably all heard of and maybe experienced is handling counteroffers, rejections, but also having multiple offers on the table at once to increase your leverage. That is our golden nugget. That's what we want to be aiming for. If you have multiple offers, you can play them off each other. It can be used to expedite a process and decision making as well. A number of times I say to a client who has got to a final offer with a company they don't really want, and there's another company that's taking their time, and I say, go and tell them. Tell them you've got an offer on the table and what's the timeline here, because you're still very interested. Sometimes that makes them really act fast. But when you've got offers on the table, you can counteroffer. You may well find you get an offer from a current employer as well, that they want to keep you, and you need to know whether or not you're prepared to stay. By the way, if you ever go out and get an offer, but your plan is to stay internal, you've got to be prepared to walk. If you say, I've got this offer on the table, what can you do to meet it? Because if you don't leave when they say, no, we're not going to do anything, you've just put yourself on the back foot. If you've got an offer that you want to use to negotiate improved terms and conditions internally, you've got to be prepared to walk if they don't meet you, or at least don't improve your current situation. I want you also to be looking at what your limits are. I want you to know your values and your goals. I want you to have an understanding of what triggers a negative emotion in you, how you're going to maintain your professionalism, how you're going to handle rejections. Rejection is a natural part of a negotiation process, and it's really important to not take it personally. I want you to figure out how you're going to work on staying composed. We talk about this all the time, but how do you do that? That's a very personal thing. How are you going to take the time to thank the person in front of you when you're going, well, that wasn't very pleasant? How are you going to thank them for their time and consideration? How are you going to find the time to evaluate alternative options, potential next steps? When you are effective at handling counteroffers, rejections, you're going to have a great mindset, clear communication, and a willingness to explore alternative opportunities, which is precisely what you need as a leader. I want you to know, with everything I'm saying, negotiation is nuanced. It relies on cultural norms, organizational structures, economic conditions. It does change. I'm recording this in May 2024. 2 years ago, negotiations went very differently. Pre-pandemic, 5 years ago, very, very differently, right? 5 years ago, I can't even remember when the pandemic started. It's so far ago, right? You've got to understand the conditions you're in, the regions, the industries, whether there's a fixed pay structure, whether there's any room for negotiation or there's limited room for negotiation, what the culture is in terms of expectation of negotiation, pay practices, fairness, consistency. I, for one, my company, we have a very clearly defined pay structure because I think fairness and transparency around pay is key. And I know some companies are moving towards that. I know people have criticized my model and, fair enough to them. That's fine. It's up to you where you want to work. But a lot of companies are moving to more these more transparent pay models. That comes with the negative of there's going to be less room for negotiation. My view is if you want to come work with me, then hopefully I can meet you where you need to be. But if you don't, I'm going to send you on your way with a blessing. It might make me reevaluate my pay for everybody. Maybe I'm underpaying everyone. So it can actually still be worth trying to negotiate, because it might be that the company wakes up and realizes, you know what, we are undercompensating here. And certainly I would like to think, maybe this is very naive on my part, when you have these fixed transparent pay brackets, I'd like to think it's done because we're trying to be better. At least that's where I'm coming from, right? I want transparency around pay because I want to be better. And therefore, if I found out that I was massively underpaying, I would have to look at my pay structure. Even if that meant I couldn't hire right now because I couldn't afford to, I don't want to know. So if in doubt, ask. But make sure that whatever you negotiate, that you fully understand what is on the table. I mentioned RSUs earlier. There are different kinds of stock options. RSUs are restricted stock that vests over a period of time. You've got to stay in the company to see it. You might get equity, but if it's a startup, you might never see it. If it's a big company, it might be based on when they go through a sale. If it's a public company, then you have to decide if you want to ever sell it. Base salary is still probably the most important thing. It's that reliable income stream. But you've also got to look at things such as healthcare. What's your healthcare like? What are going to be your base costs for whatever healthcare you're getting? Are you getting other bonuses that are really important to you? I know some people will get health benefits like access to a health club, or they get a veg box or something like that. And for them, that's actually worth quite a lot, right? we're all unique, we're all individual. Ask yourself what matters. I always say, if you're not going to get a specific thing that you're after that you've had maybe in the past, and something I see this from the point of view of coaching. I've had clients who have not been able to negotiate coaching. And I say, well, make sure you negotiate extra base, but make sure the extra base is enough to cover the cost of coaching plus your taxes. Weirdly, sometimes companies are more open to that. I think it's because they don't want to make a commitment, because I always say, if you're going to get coaching, and make sure it's in your contract that you have it for while you're in that company. Otherwise, that gets cut at some point, right? And so I think it might be that it's easier for companies to provide additional base instead. But so if there's a perk you want that isn't in this, make sure you get additional base pay instead. And because of that, you can adapt your negotiation based on what it is that's actually on the table. Okay, I hope you've heard a lot of useful tips here, all things you should be considering. The most important thing though is do your research, maintain composure, ask for what you're really worth rather than what you can get away with living on, and then pause when you ask for it. And you might be surprised how favorable things can be. This year, clients of mine have all but one have increased their compensation, even though we're living in a really weird time. There's layoffs left, right, and center, and yet these women are increasing their compensation. If you need assistance with any of this, you need assistance with achieving your career goals, understanding your worth, negotiation, or those very important first 90 days, as well as interview practice, then come and work with me and my team. We're here to help you land your dream role, secure that promotion, and I would love for you to come and find out more. Head over to my website, tonicollis.com. There's a little tab at the top called Work With Us. Click on that, book a call with me. I'm happy to chat. But let's work together and make sure you're recognized and compensated for the value you bring, okay? All right, ladies, until next time, remember, stay in your tech leadership game, follow your dreams, because the world really does need that uniqueness that you bring as a leading woman in tech.